My name is Livia Hoffman. I'm a senior at St. Ignatius College Prep with the love of the classical world and Ptolemaic Egypt. I currently volunteer at the National Hellenic Museum and was originally going to provide a series of lectures over the course of 3 weeks on site. Due to the current situation caused by COVID-19, I will be presenting these pre-recorded lectures, which I have titled the Eureka seminars, online. Today we are going to talk about Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt. In order to learn about Cleopatra, we first have to understand how her family became Egyptian royalty. Cleopatra was descended from the Macedonian Ptolemy I, which means that Cleopatra is generally considered as being Greek. In order to understand how a family of Greeks became pharaohs of Egypt, we need to talk about Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was the Macedonian king who conquered most of the ancient world, including Egypt. As his empire grew, Alexander began to have his generals look after areas of his empire. Ptolemy I was one of Alexander's generals and was responsible for looking after Egypt. After the death of Alexander in 323 BC, Ptolemy made himself the pharaoh and ruler of Egypt. The Ptolemaic dynasty was named after Ptolemy I, and his descendants ruled Egypt up until 30 BC, which was when the Romans conquered Egypt. Before we get to talking about Cleopatra, we should examine the time period she lived in. The Ptolemaic period marked the introduction of Greek culture into Egyptian society. During this time, the capital of Egypt was moved from Memphis to a city called Alexandria, which was named in honor of Alexander the Great. The capital was the center of Greek culture in Egypt, and many famous monuments were located here, such as the Library of Alexandria and the Lighthouse of Alexandria. The Library of Alexandria was one of the largest libraries of the ancient world. It was destroyed in a huge fire around 2,000 years ago, and there are sadly no traces of its existence left behind. This lack of evidence has led some to believe that the library was only a myth. However, the Lighthouse of Alexandria is generally considered as having existed. The lighthouse was also known as the Lighthouse of Pharos, as it was built on the island of Pharos outside the harbors of Alexandria. The lighthouse had the impressive height of over 100 meters, which made it one of the tallest structures of the time. It was ordered to be built by Ptolemy I, and it took 12 years for it to be completed. The tower was so impressive for its time that it's one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Sadly, the lighthouse was destroyed by earthquakes. Recently, archaeologists have found remains of artifacts on the seafloor surrounding the island of Pharos. These archaeologists believe that these artifacts, including the sculpture of Ptolemy I, were once originally part of the lighthouse. Now let's talk about Cleopatra. Cleopatra was born as a princess of Egypt and as a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which at this point had ruled Egypt for over 300 years. As I mentioned before, Cleopatra was not Egyptian, but was instead Greek. She grew up learning to read, write, and speak Greek. She also learned Egyptian and Latin. She was one of the few Ptolemies to study Egyptian, as many in her family refused to speak in anything but Greek. Her efforts to learn Egyptian were praised by the people, as they saw her actions as supporting the culture and traditions of Egypt before the time of the Greeks. Here is a ceramic bust of Queen Cleopatra. While Cleopatra is considered to be beautiful, it is important to note that Cleopatra's fame and power were because of her intelligence and her charisma, and not because of her appearance. The Romans portrayed Cleopatra as a woman who relied only on her looks, but in actuality, she was a well-educated woman who studied language, mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy. Cleopatra became Queen of Egypt when she married her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. While this is gross, at the time it was considered normal for brothers and sisters of nobility to marry, as it was believed that the bloodline would be preserved in this way. Because her brother was only 10 at the time, Cleopatra assumed the duties of pharaoh and acted as a stand-in king. However, her brother wanted to gain back power as he grew older, and eventually Cleopatra was forced out of the palace and replaced. Around the time when Cleopatra was banished by her brother, she crossed paths with Julius Caesar. Cleopatra used her wits and her charm to convince Caesar to help her take back the throne from her brother. With the aid of Caesar and his forces, Cleopatra was able to defeat her brother at the Battle of the Nile, and after the battle, Cleopatra took back the throne and assumed the power of pharaoh. Before we continue to talk about Cleopatra, we should take a moment to talk about Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was the famous Roman general known for his military conquests. Caesar's rise to power was a result of his success in conquering Gaul, or what is now known today as modern France. After Cleopatra took her power back, she and Caesar fell in love. The two even had a child together, who was named Caesarion, or Little Caesar. But despite the romance between them, Cleopatra still maintained Egypt's independence from Rome, and she was a popular ruler as she embraced Egyptian culture and she maintained the country's autonomy from the Roman Republic. Let's go back to talking about Caesar. Despite having the support of the common people of Rome, who were known as the plebeians, Caesar was viewed by some as being a threat to the Roman Republic, and a conspiracy was formed against him. In 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated, which left a power vacuum in Rome. In 41 BC, following Caesar's death, Cleopatra met Mark Antony. Mark Antony was one of the three major leaders to emerge after Caesar's death, who wanted to have power over Rome. Mark Antony and Cleopatra formed a military alliance against one of these major leaders, who was named Octavian, and the two actually fell in love in the process. Before we continue, let's take a moment to quickly talk about Octavian, as he is a prominent figure of history. Octavian was the nephew of Julius Caesar, and he would eventually become the first emperor of Rome. After Caesar was killed, Octavian began to gather support in Rome, and began to clash with Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Conflict between Mark Antony and Octavian grew, as the two fought for their control over Egypt. This eventually led to the Battle of Actium, where Octavian's troops defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra's army. After her forces were defeated in the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra committed suicide by letting a poisonous snake called an asp bite her, as she refused to become a prisoner to Rome. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and saw Egypt shift under the control of Rome. Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire, and was known by the Romans as Aegyptus. While the most accepted theory of Cleopatra's death is that she allowed an asp to bite her, as mentioned before, her cause of death has not been completely resolved. This is because the historical accounts of her death, which describe her passing as slow and painless, are very different from what a bite from an asp actually causes. Some believe that Cleopatra was instead poisoned, and even further guess that Octavian was the one to do it. Today, Cleopatra is remembered as one of the most important queens in Egyptian history. Research of her whereabouts continue, as archaeologists have been searching for her tomb, which has yet to be discovered. This is because historians cannot agree on where her tomb is. The historical accounts contradict one another, and theories of her tomb's location vary. However, excavations at Upper Egypt have hinted at the possibility that Cleopatra is located here. Maybe you'll be the one to find it. Thank you for listening to my talk. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking more about the classical world with you. I hope that you were still able to enjoy my lesson on Cleopatra and the Ptolemaic dynasty, and I hope you were able to learn something new and exciting. I look forward to discussing the cuisine of the ancient Rome and sharing a recipe from the ancient cookbook of Apicius. Thank you again, and have a great day. Bye!